Fun facts. Over the course of some amount of time, I lost track. I tried to animate an intro for this video, but it didn't work out that way. The thing is, it wasn't even the animating that did it in. I mean, it was tedious to animate it, but the death blow was trying to import it. It just wouldn't. The one time it did, it was corrupted. I Okay. What was this video about again? Oh, right. Spy. My first love. When I first got this game, I played heavy for one match, then started playing Spy, and essentially played Spy for 6 straight years. Alas, that was many a year ago. Now I am rusty with age. Although I can kinda, sorta, not really aim now, so, there's that, kinda. Right. But what caused me to pick Spy all those years ago? What causes other players to pick Spy, even now? I mean, Spy isn't exactly the strongest class in the game, relying almost entirely on enemy mistakes and also having one of the very few hard counters in the entire game. Okay, it may or may not have something to do with anime. I mean, the amazing gameplay, backstabs, insta kills in the form of backstabs are cool. Invisibility is cool. And generally, just feeling like you're smarter than everybody else. Am I right? Yeah. Yeah. Spy stereotypes. Okay. Spy definitely has a very unique playstyle. Very different from everything else. Okay, yeah, no duh. Obviously, the class built on stealth and blending in and ambushing, kind of, I guess you could say it's a type of ambushing that he does. Okay, it's obvious Spy's different. But I feel that on occasion, Spy's uniqueness can be somewhat overlooked. I mean, as I said before, it's obvious, but at the same time, it can often get lumped in with broad simplifications of other classes. I mean, for example, let's look at Spy. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. What the hell is this guy talking about? And I have to say, I honestly don't know. As the previous 3-minute, 24-second, 13-millisecond clip was the result of intermediate editing over the course of several weeks of procrastination. I know, quite pathetic. That being said, I'm leaving it in, as both a warning to people watching this that it doesn't get any better, and a reminder to myself that I need to get an actual goddamn work ethic. With that being said, I'm sorry, and let's get to the part where I actually start making some sense. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word spy? Well, in the context of Tf2, I mean. It has to be something that's fundamental to Spy himself, right? It has to be what he does most of the time, what ties him all together. Obviously, his revolvers. I mean, come on now. It's the most interesting part of Spy's kit. It's ironically the only traditional weapon he has, and above all else, it probably changes his overall playstyle the most. Don't believe me? Well, think about it like this. Spy's various knives definitely have their own unique qualities, encouraging different playstyles, and largely giving an easier time in certain situations. But at the end of the day, a knife's a knife. You're gonna use it for the same scenario: getting in, getting a kill, then dying horribly. My point being that you can oftentimes tell more about a spy from his revolvers than his knife. I mean, part of that is due to just the sheer variety of the revolvers. I mean, look at this. You have consistent damage, inconsistent damage, underpowered damage, and overpowered damage. Okay, fine. Maybe all of them have something to do with damage, but still, I maintain that they are very interesting, and more so than the knives. I mean, look at this one, the Letranger, 40% cloak duration, plus 15 cloak on hit. Perfect utility that has nothing to do. Okay, it has a damage penalty, but still, it's something that it doesn't boost Spy's damage capacity. Like seriously, it's always confused me as to why Spy's only real utility primary is the Letranger. Uh, like he seems like the perfect class to give weird, wacky primaries that do weird things. But whatever. For some of you, it might be a bit difficult to truly understand the stats of the Letranger. So let's put it in some context. The stock Invis watch will give you about 10 seconds of invisibility. Some people have said it's like 9 point something seconds, but close enough, close enough. So, with the 40% extra cloak duration of the Retranger, this will give the stock Invis watch 14 seconds of invisibility. Okay, so originally I was I was going to go into an in-depth explanation of every single scenario in which the 40% extra cloak duration would come in handy. Then I realized I don't have time for that, so just imagine it like this. You get 4 extra seconds of Spy's main positioning ability. You can probably see how that would be pretty good. Right? Right. But with that talk about good things, we need to talk about bad things, like the 20% damage penalty on the Letranger, which isn't actually all that bad. Let me explain. Let's compare it to the stock revolver, which, I mean, that's what the stats are modifying. Of course, we're going to talk about the stock revolver. Listen, the stock does 40 base damage, 60 maximum damage, and 21 minimum damage. Now, throwing in the 20% damage penalty and some basic math, the Letranger does 32 base damage, 48 maximum damage, blanking, and 17 minimum damage. Now, I'm not sure about you, but when I'm playing Spy, the only real time I use the revolver is at close range. Obviously, there's like the occasional exception, but for the most part, close range. So we're just gonna focus on these two numbers right here. All right. So looking at those numbers, you might be thinking, wait a second. You said that this isn't really all that bad, but from what it looks like, it's pretty bad. And to that I say, let's look at the class's healths. Healths? Yeah, healths. Okay, so 125 health is the most common amount of health to have, with 4 classes having it, and that includes yourself,
gentlemen,
and the 2 classes that you're going to be revolvering the most.
Yeah!
The thing about the 125 health pool is that, well, they take the same number of shots from both the revolver and the Letranger. So, when you're duking it out with classes that aren't meant for combat and scout,
No, seriously, you all suck.
You're going to be taking the exact same number of hits to kill them. Now, that leaves out the fact that it also takes the same number of hits for the stock revolver to kill, medics, demos, and pyros. But hey, still, the 3-shot damage from the Letranger still only does 6 less than medic's health. Then again, the second shot from the stock revolver is only 5 away from 125 health. Okay. But hey, is the extra shot really that bad? Is it? Well, I think not. And I'm going to show you a clip that 100% proves my point. Okay? Okay, cool.
3 medics all healing each other, meanwhile the rest of the team's fucking dying.
See? Look at that. It was easy. Kinda. I mean, I ran into a pyro immediately after spawning, but I managed to survive because of 4. Actually, it was 6. I missed 2 shots. 4 well placed shots and a health kit. See, it's easy. Well, not easy, but okay. What I'm trying to say is, Lutron be please nerf, except no, not really. Imagine that's the update we get. No, nothing to do with bots, nothing to do with nothing, just Latronjo nerf. Yeah, that seems that the more I think about it, the more I think to myself, yeah, that's probably what would happen. Right. So, with all this talk of 3 shots and 4 shots, you might be wondering, can you 2-shot with Spy? You know, the thing that every other class can do to every class that doesn't begin with the letter H.
Yes!
Well, first off, don't be greedy. You have a 1-shot. And second off, yes. Yes, you can. In fact, there's actually a few weapons in Spy's arsenal that 2-shot people. But, if you remember correctly, this one's underpowered. And this one's overpowered. So, like, you know, in order to avoid setting a bad example, and the fact that I'm lazy, I've decided that we aren't going to be talking about these 2. Right, the Ambassador. Truly the epitome of 2-shotting capability, mainly due to its big and only upside of critting on headshot. Truly giving Sniper a run for his money. I mean, come on now. Who even needs this guy dealing 150 damage at any particular range? We have the Ambassador, able to deal 102 damage at rather close range. Now, if you happen to know the patented Tf2 crit formula, then you might be thinking to yourself, 102 damage, close range? That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem right. But, well, the Ambassador has downsides. You know, like every single other weapon. Well, I guess stock technically doesn't have downsides, but still, downsides. In fact, the Ambassador has quite a few downsides, more than upsides, like the 15% damage penalty, which drops the base damage down to oh no, I was doing that was a joke where I forgot it, but I actually forgot it. Uh, 34 damage, 34 base damage. That's why the crit headshot damage is lowered, because the regular damage is lowered. I know. 15% damage penalty affects all damage. I know, quite the revelation, quite the revelation. Then there's the 20% firing speed penalty. I don't really have much to say about that. It lowers your damage over time. Think of it like that. Then critical hits affected by range, which doesn't do a whole lot. Like, you might think it does a lot, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't operate under normal damage fall off rules. Like it seems like with other weapons, the fall off like it happens. Well, actually, now that I think about it, it probably happens with the normal range. They just aren't including the damage ramp up. This is what happens when I don't have a script. I just go off on tangents. Anyways. Yeah, as I made abundantly clear, the Ambassador has a lot of downsides. So much so that there are more than a few people who believe this is a bad weapon, which I mean, kinda. I prefer the term inconsistent personally, which to some people just means bad. Or, if you want a more positive connotation, high risk, high reward. The thing is, Spy is already kind of 90% that, inconsistent, high risk, high reward, occasionally popping off, but most of the time, no, not really. And so adding on that extra little 10% can be, to some Spy players, rather scary because you're effectively giving up one of the few consistent things that you have. Whether or not that's worth it is up to you as a player. But with that being said, that's the downsides taken care of, which means we can talk about the thing that really makes this weapon shine. The crits on headshots, the only thing that makes this weapon shine. Yeah. So, 102 damage will give any class a rather bloody nose. Of course, the severity will vary from near death to just a bit over half health. Except for heavy. Heavies will be fine in most situations regarding the ambassador alone. In fact, as a rule of thumb, whenever I refer to every class when talking about the ambassador, just assume I mean every class except for heavy. With that being said, Spy with the ambassador can two-shot every single class in the game. However, there is a differential between one two-shot and the other, because with light classes and medic, you can headshot them and then just regular shot them. But with pyros, demos, and soldiers, you have to hit 2 headshots. Hopefully it's obvious that the former is far more consistent than the latter, with the latter being, well, honestly, most of the time, in fact, you probably shouldn't even go for it at all. But that's not to say it doesn't happen. Look at this clip here. I'm walking away from spawn when I see a pyro in my spawn. That's a problem. And he starts harassing my medic, and, well, we can't have that, so I go up and try to backstab him. But he notices me, and that doesn't work out, and so I'm probably gonna die. But no, I don't die. I don't. I hit him with 2 headshots and walk away without even being burned, although the medic was, so I suppose that was a problem for him. Then there's the situations where your enemy has low enough health that you can just straight up kill them. Such situations would require an immense amount of luck if it weren't for Spy's natural ability to see enemy players' health, something only one other class can do. The medic, and even then he has to use a weapon to do so. But you just have it as Spy. So, with this ability, you can help find yourself into situations like these, where you know for an absolute fact that you will be finishing off this player and punishing them for their arrogance. I mean, come on, look at him. Standing there, thinking he's so safe while I'm around. Truly, no one has ever been so self-absorbed. I mean, okay, so I got a bit off track there. You have my apologies. I think it's time we talk about the knives, unfortunately. So here's my deal with the knives. The pros and cons of each knife are always a bit more nuanced, kinda. Okay. What I'm saying is, technically speaking, you can fit all the knives into the survivability category, except maybe the stock knife. But even when you divide it further, you don't get much farther. I mean, you can put all the knives into a passive or aggressive playstyle. Okay. what I'm trying to say here is that you can't really paint the knives with a broad stroke. It doesn't help much in what I'm trying to do with this video. But I also really don't have time for describing each and every situation and which knife would be better in each. And okay, here's what I'm going to do instead. Bullet points. You know, like a couple quick things about each knife. Well, maybe more than a couple. Hopefully that's good. Right, so first up, the stock knife. Uh, it's the stock knife. It has no anything. It's generic. It has no upsides. Well, actually, now that I think about it, it does have one upside. It has no downside, which I think is you could classify it as an upside. Uh, anyways, on to the more interesting knives. Right. Then there's the Spycicle, which is a weapon I don't really think gets talked about enough. I mean, it gives a pretty good safety net against your biggest enemy, pyros. Then again, you also don't really get anything else out of it, so for some spy players, it can be a bit difficult to get full value out of it. And that's not even talking about the downsides, which can limit some plays you can make as spy. I mean, if you're the type of spy to go for more sacrificial plays, then you probably aren't going to have a very good time with this weapon in some situations. I mean, if you go into situations expecting to die but not caring because you're going to get a super important pick out of it, but then a pyro comes along and burns away your knife, well, now you aren't going to get the pick and you're probably still going to die anyways. However, this does offer a surprising amount of synergy with the ambassador, allowing you to, in some admittedly rare situations, recover and get the pick you were going after anyways, which leads into the next point being that it's the gun spy's knife of choice. Like, seriously, it can give a particularly good spy a chance at 1v1ing pyros just by pulling it out at the right time and having decent aim. In fact, I'd almost be willing to say this weapon elevates gun spy from a meme to an actual subclass. But that being said, almost only counts with rockets and sticky bombs, and I already talked about the revolvers, so it's time to move on, unfortunately. The Your Eternal Reward is the perfect embodiment of spy in weapon form, mostly because you feel like a genius when succeeding, and you want to throw it away when failing. That being said, don't use it. It's terrible. I mean, the upsides, that being, disguise on the person you backstabbed and your kills not showing up in the kill feed or making any noise, aren't even the worst. They can even help you in a few niche situations, like, for example, an engineer who knows how to properly distance his buildings, or multiple engineers, or a rather hectic firefight where you can safely get a few kills just more safely. Then again, there are other ways to accomplish those things without suffering the Your Eternal Reward's horrendous downsides. I mean, there's the 33% cloak drain, which, I mean, come on, it's just, you can probably tell how that would be terrible. But then there's the, your cloak meter completely disappearing upon disguising with your disguise kit, which, I mean, isn't as bad as the cloak drain, but still, it's going to screw you over eventually. The Big Earner is a weapon in which I keep forgetting the name of. I don't know why, it's not the weirdest name in TF2, and yet I still keep forgetting it. It just seems like it should be named something else. But in terms of gameplay, it serves to kind of extremify Spy. You're even more vulnerable when you're not backstabbing people, yet your backstab is even more fruitful. And that's kind of all I have to say about the Big Earner. Yeah, I know it's weird. Some people can make like a 20-minute video out of just one weapon. I just kind of say a few sentences. But I suppose that's the way it is. Alright, the kunai. Essentially everything I said about the Big Earner applies here, except the name part. The name for the kunai is fine. Oh, it also generally speaking encourages a much more aggressive playstyle than the Big Earner, and essentially every other knife. So, yeah, there's that. Yeah, those were the knives that Spy has. And that's about as good as a transition you're gonna get. Let's talk about cloaking. You know, invisibility. The thing that Spy has, that he relies on a lot. Something that can be rather easily divided into 3 steps, qualities. Let's just number 1, cloaking. Number 2, being invisible. And number 3, decloaking. See, it's kind of steps, I guess. Anyways, let's talk first about cloaking. You know, turning invisible, but not, well, kind of. Yeah, turning invisible. Cloaking in and of itself takes 1 second from you pressing your alt fire to you actually becoming invisible. It also makes a sound, but you probably won't be needing to worry about it. And also, you won't be needing to worry about it in terms of actually timing it, as long as you played Spy for more than, I don't know, say 10 seconds. But in case you haven't done that, then just try to remember to do it before you see the enemies. Also, on a side note, remember to disguise after you turn invisible and not before, as if you cloak while disguising, the smoke disguising makes will continue even while you're invisible. I know it's stupid, but you're gonna have to make sure to remember it. With that being said, that's pretty much the basics. Well, intermediates of cloaking. So we should probably talk about invisibility now. And if you thought that last section was short, don't worry, this one's going to be much longer. Or at least I think it will. I write the script as I talk, so for all I know, this one's going to last like 30 seconds. But onto the actual subject matter at hand here, invisibility lasts approximately 10 seconds. However, if you remember from before, I mentioned that cloaking takes 1 second. That actually eats into invisibility time, so in reality it's 9 seconds. And those are approximations, so there might be some milliseconds thrown in there. Being invisible gives you 3 status effect type things added to you, aside from, not being able to be seen by the enemy. And those 3 are, number 1, not being able to interact with the objective whether or not you're defending or attacking. Number 2, a 20% damage resistance to all sources. And number 3, any status effects like, Durality or Afterburn, it will dissipate in half the amount of time as if you were not invisible. Well, I mean, there are other things, like you can't attack and you get revealed for a split second when you bump into other players, or when you get attacked by other players, but I thought those were a bit more obvious. And also, let's just talk about the damage resistance for just a bit longer. I don't know why it exists, just for me. Well, I mean, I do know why it exists. It's to increase Spy's survivability. I just don't know if it really does that in any meaningful capacity. In my experience, if you get caught out and the team is even halfway decent, you're going to die. And even if the team isn't halfway decent, then you probably shouldn't be getting caught out, and then you just don't really need it in the first place. And overall, I just don't really think it does anything to increase Spy's survivability. If Spy's survivability really needed to be increased, it would be better to say have a speed boost while invisible. That's not to say the damage resistance is useless, especially if you're using one of the knives that lower your base health, but I just have to say, for me, and it's entirely possible I just don't notice it when it does work, but for me, it's just helping in situations where I would have survived anyway. But again, that's just me. Sorry if that wasn't especially coherent, but I just really needed to express my belief of how close to useless that mechanic gets. Anyways, more about invisibility itself. You can classify it into 2 situations: when people are looking for you and when people aren't looking for you. The latter is much more easy to explain than the former. I mean, come on, you just walk forward. Okay, it's not that easy. But in short, just try to take advantage of the situation you find yourself in. If there's a flank route without many people around, then go through there. Just in general, try to avoid big choke points. But if your hand is forced, then try to wait for a lull in the fighting and spam, and just try to make a break for it. However, if no such opportunity presents itself, then it's best, at least in my experience, to go for the exact opposite. Really high intensity fights where you can just manage to slip through the cracks. Your survival in such cases, though, is a bit more luck dependent than most, and that's with Spy, the luck dependent class. Because when that inevitable stray rocket or bullet hits you, you have to kind of hope that the enemy team is so engrossed in fighting that they don't notice you. Or, if they're at the disadvantage, so desperate that they figure it's better to stay in the fight with the immediate threat than to go chase the spy, the threat that's going to come in later. There are, of course, other situations that would require other tactics, but you know, those are more map specific or game mode specific, or just more specific in general, and I'm trying to be rather broad with this video. Not too broad, but still broad enough. So we're going to go into the next topic, being invisible while somebody is chasing after you. A rather unfortunate situation you're in, I know. But it's one you're going to be finding yourself in a good chunk of the time. Now, I'm just going to assume you don't have, a status effect applied to you, like, say, Afterburn. After all, if that's the situation you find yourself in, you're gonna just have to get lucky or be close to the relative safety of the rest of your team. That's kind of the only way you're getting out of that. But in terms of they know you're around but don't know your specific location and are actively looking for your specific location, well, it's important to remember that everybody moves with a purpose in mind. Whether it's moving towards the enemy to kill them, a health pack or dispenser for, well, health, dodging bullets, or running away because they just Ubered, everybody has a purpose when moving, and that means everybody has a destination when moving. And with a bit of experience, you can kind of figure out where everybody's destination is. And although not everyone you go up against will have that experience, I found it's better to assume you're going up against the best players to grace the game, rather than assuming they installed an hour ago. Which is to say, the first place you try to go to, you should probably think twice, as there's a chance your opponent is going to cut you off. In fact, don't even go to the second place you think to go. In fact, while you're at it, don't even go to the third. Okay, actually, the third place is usually fine. Hopefully, you see what I'm getting at is be unpredictable. Not just by occasionally stutter stepping, but full on change your plan when people are looking for you. And that will get you out of some situations where the enemy team is looking for you. There are other strategies, like, for example, if you were to have the cloak and dagger, you can just stand still. Nothing's more unpredictable than that. I mean, in fact, I'd say from a purely personal experience, I have the most success with this strategy. I mean, you will have to move eventually. Well, I mean, I guess you don't have to, but if you want to have fun and actually play the game, you'll have to move. And also, as a little fun fact, you can accomplish a similar effect by using the stock Invis Watch. You just have to be disguised while invisible, which will allow you to get cloak Invis juice by standing near a enemy dispenser, or if you want to be more safe, on top of the enemy dispenser. This will allow you to, at least in theory, stay invisible for, well, ever. One more thing to note about that, though, is that only a level 2 and 3 dispensers will actively regenerate your cloak back. A level 1 dispenser will just stop your cloak from degrading. And that is, in effect, what you should do while invisible. or at least everything that came to my mind when I came up with this section. Anyways, uh, what about decloaking? You know, when you decide you don't want to be invisible anymore. Like, when should you decloak and for what purpose? Well, I mean, there are the obvious, like decloaking to backstab somebody, but there are other things, like, say, for self defense. Well, actually, when I think about it, the enemy chasing you has to be dangerous enough to actively be killing you, but also not dangerous enough where you can just, escape. For self defense to be a viable option. Okay, most of the time you'll probably just be better off staying invisible. It's not even really viable from like a high risk, high rewards perspective, or even just going out in a blaze of glory perspective, since it takes 2 whole seconds to fully decloak, meaning that with essentially every class, you probably aren't even going to get a shot off. And then there's backcapping, the other niche situation in which you decloak, and I have to say I'm of two minds about it. I mean, on one hand, you can at the very least take away a couple enemies away from the fight, or even take the objective, which is of course a very good thing for your team. But on the other hand, you know how I said drawing enemies back to the objective was helpful? Well, you know what else could be helpful? Backstabbing those enemies. And although there is a chance you'll take the objective, it's not likely because it depends on so many factors, like, is the enemy team overextended? How many of the enemy team is dead? And how quickly are they going to respawn? Overall, when the opportunity presents itself, backcapping can be a huge boon for your team, but more often than not, the opportunity isn't going to present itself, and even when it does, there's so many factors to consider that you should usually, at the very least, hesitate before going for it. With all that being said, though, it's time for the real meat of decloaking. To kill somebody with your knife. Well, probably your knife, if you have any common sense at least. Unless there's a Razorback sniper. Whatever. Originally, I was going to explain the proper way to decloak and kill somebody using an acronym. But then I realized I have neither the creativity nor the vocabulary to make the acronym into a funny word. And in all honesty, what's the point of an acronym if you can't make it into a funny word? I mean, come on now. So instead, I have the totally amazing bland steps that will help you succeed in killing unsavory characters after uncloaking yourself in the game Team Defense 4-2. Catchy, I know. Step 1. Finding the right spot. Hopefully the title was a little self-explanatory. You need to find a spot that's close enough that you can easily clear the distance to backstab your target, but not so close that they can easily hear you or that they accidentally bump into you. You also need to make sure you're out of the way of particularly treaded paths, like, for example, in between the enemies and a health pack or their dispenser. Or if you're in the direct path between the enemy spawn and their front lines, as there's going to be a chance that you get caught by people going to and from those locations. Oh, and if you want to stay in a place for the long haul, you're going to want to put yourself close to an ammo pack or dispenser. Then again, you can also just use the cloak and dagger, but that will limit you in other situations, but will help extremely in this one situation. Step 2. Waiting. So you found your spot or area. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? Yeah, you don't have to stand perfectly still in one spot. You can pace or whatever in a small area. It's not like against the rules or whatever. But let's talk about what comes after that. Waiting. Waiting for what? You probably didn't ask. Well, waiting for the opportunity to strike. For your targets to be distracted and for them to be in a situation where they won't notice your approach. In other words, you have to wait for loud noises, like multiple people firing their weapons at once. and for the enemy team to be mostly focusing on something else, like, say, your team coming in to kill them, which means essentially wait for chaos to descend. That shouldn't take too long in your standard game of TF2. Step 3. Stabbing them in the back. I think this one is the most self-explanatory of the bunch, so I only have a few words of advice. 1. Remember, decloaking takes 2 seconds, and you can't attack during those 2 seconds, so try to pace your approach. 2. Try not to get tunnel vision. If you're really intent on killing that one singular person that's been killing your entire team, you might miss easier kills that could be more guaranteed and could potentially give you a slightly safer escape. Of course, this is Spy we're talking about, so safety is relative, but still safety. 3. Try to plan out what happens after your backstab, if you're successful, of course. Now, no, your plan doesn't have to be detailed. It can be as simple as just going towards your team, trying to get an extra kill regardless of risk, or just running away the second you get the kill. Just a loose idea that you can follow in the probable chaos that's going to follow your backstab. Well, I mean, if it wasn't chaotic beforehand, that is. And yeah, that's that. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all next time. Okay, fine. Listen, I know I didn't get around to your interactions with the engineer class, or disguises, or some more, shall we say, exotic forms of backstab. Okay, come on. I got you. I taught you the basics, or intermediates in some cases. And, like, come on, if I really covered every single topic about Spy, I'd be here all day, which I wouldn't mind since I love talking about TF2. But do you know how long this took? Actually, I'm not going to tell you how long this took. I don't want anybody to know how much procrastination I do. Uh, Listen, do you want this video to be 40 minutes? I mean, come on. What do you mean? It's already 40 minutes. No, God. Might as well be a video essay at this point. You know what? I don't have to justify this to you. I'm going to go work on the next project that'll make me feel terrible when I don't complete it in a week. It'll probably be TF2 related. And you can go back to doing whatever it is you were doing before this video. Goodbye.